given, my dedication to this, it still blows my mind that any of them make it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems impossible. It seems impossible for a fish to undergo 1,200 river miles, 2 years in the ocean, 16 dam crossings, and all of the obstacles in between to make it back to the gravel bed that they were born in and spawn and start it over.
Yep.
But the fact that they're still able to do it at all is
miraculous.
It's miraculous.
Yeah.
It's magic.
Yeah.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. A hot drink can become cool in two primary ways, through conduction and convection. Conduction occurs when two objects touch each other. Imagine holding a piece of ice. Before long, your fingers are cold and the ice begins to melt. That's conduction. Convection occurs when a gas or liquid moves from being different temperatures. When you heat water over a stove, the warm water moves up and the cool water moves down. That's what you're seeing when water boils, and that's convection. A stainless vacuum bottle prevents conduction from occurring by creating a void between the walls of the bottle, thermos, or cup and the outside air. It prevents convection by keeping all the liquid inside at the same temperature. That's how a Stanley product keeps your cold drink cold and your hot drink hot. And they've been doing it for 110 years. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Stanley 1913, and you can check out their new and classic line of products at stanley1913.com. Okay, take me through a little story time, Kyle. If you are a steelhead egg and you get laid in a gravel bar in the Wallowa River on the Six Ranch a month from now, you're 600 river miles exactly from the Pacific Ocean. What's your life going to be like?
It's a pretty tough life. 1% small to adult ratio, like we talked about earlier. Your chances of making it back as an adult are extremely low.
So if you have 99 siblings, all of them die.
Right.
Okay.
And you're the lucky one.
You're the lucky one. So let's just assume you're going to be one of the ones that makes it back. So just kind of take me through it.
Yeah. So you'll spend your first 1 to 2 years in freshwater.
Yep.
Hanging out on Six Ranch.
Yep.
Beautiful views.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of wildlife.
Yep.
And then you get an itch, crazy itch, and you start thinking about heading out to the ocean. And that's where most of your brothers and sisters are going to lose it.
So are you going to point your head downstream and just go for it?
Negative. I mean, so historically, you would have gotten flushed out with spring freshet, or, when you come up out of the gravel, there's plenty of water moving out towards the ocean. And so you just tuck your head up, face upstream, and get flushed out. All you got to do is just maintain your equilibrium, and,
But is that after that 1 to 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, with this river restoration project that we did here, we put in a lot of root wads that are, connected to a big tree that's buried into the bank.
Right.
And those root wads are in the water, and that provides a lot of really valuable space for those baby fish to hang out in and escape predators. There's less current right there. There's lots of detritus and, small insects and things for them to eat. So, after that 1 year or 2 year cycle, the snow starts to melt, rivers come up. Now we're heading to the ocean, but we're swimming backwards.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't know that if you pull a fish backwards in the current, that you'll drown them, that they can only diffuse oxygen over their gills in one direction.
Right.
So they got to face upstream.
Right.
Very important. Okay. So now we're going down the Wallowa, hoping to not get eaten by a river otter or a bull trout. Then we hit the Grand Ronde. What happens there?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
More problems.
More of the same.
More and more of your siblings are getting smoked by predators.
Well, yeah. I mean, but less so than when the real trouble hits when you get to the snake.
So you get to the snake. So we go down the Grand Ronde. We hit the snake right at Rogersburg or Heller Bar, and there's a little bit of a riffle right there, and it's kind of an exciting spot. And lots of boats, lots of people trying to catch fish, but we're introducing some new predators because the temperature just changed radically, right?
Right.
So what are some of those new predators that they're dealing with, due to an altered state of, that body of water?
You got all kinds of critters. So you got smallmouth bass, walleye.
Yeah.
Plus the temperature, the warmer it is, the more energy you're expending to, just keep your cool in the summertime or in the spring.
And then in just a couple miles, there's no more current.
Right. So you got to turn around and start swimming, which is expending more energy.
And is not how they're hardwired.
Right.
Like that's not in their
DNA, as it were.
In their DNA, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty disorienting, coming from a freshwater, cold water environment where you're getting flushed out to all of a sudden you end up in this bathtub that's been baking in the sun.
Right.
It's warmer than it should be, and it's loaded with stuff that wants to kill you.
Okay. Okay. But we figured it out. We're going to adjust. We're an adaptable species, and we're heading out towards the ocean now. First obstacle.
Lower Granite Dam.
Lower Granite Dam.
Yeah.
Okay.
So run of the river. It's not a huge, high head dam like some of them in our region, but it is a big nasty turbine that wants to chew you up and make you into fish food.
Yeah. So what's the survivability like as they cross that dam on the way out?
So that's a figure that's out there in the world a lot. You'll hear a lot of people say it's 97% survival over the dams. Okay. Problem being that's just the concrete structure, right? That's just from when you and your brothers and sisters start at the top of the dam and either go through the turbine or over the top of the dam, through the floodgates. And so there's 3% of your brothers and sisters right there, just in that one fall. Okay. And you got 7 more between you and the ocean.
So that's a bad deal. Okay. But what gets people a little bit confused about this is from one side of the concrete to the other, we lose 3 out of the 100 fish.
Correct.
So we get to the other side. Now we've got another pool to navigate.
Right.
So we're swimming downstream again, not normal. What's the next obstacle?
Little Goose Dam.
Little Goose Dam.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Same thing.
About 97%?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we just lost 3 more.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Another big pool of warm water. It's been baking in the sun.
Yeah.
You get to Lower Monumental Dam.
More and more predators as we go, too.
Yep.
Because the water's getting warmer.
Yep.
And then
start mixing in avian predators. You got cormorants trying to eat you, and then you got, not quite pinnipeds yet, but those are waiting for you in a little bit. So.
Okay, so we keep on going. What's the next dam?
We made it through Lower Monumental, so we're at Ice Harbor.
Ice Harbor.
Last one before you hit the Columbia. Yep.
We're losing again.
Yep.
About 3% again.
Losing all the way down.
Okay. My math is starting to compound because, we started with 100 fish and we lost 3 of them, but, if we're losing 3% of 97 fish.
Well, that's just at the dams, James. So you got to got to factor in all the fish that got eaten by all those predators in the reservoirs before the dam.
So do we have figures in like how many of these fish are dying in the pools?
So by the time they get over through the snake system, it's about 60% of your brothers and sisters. And I'd have to double check that figure, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. 65% of your brothers and sisters are gone.
Okay. So now there's 35 or 40 of you left, and you hit the Columbia.
Right.
Are all of your troubles over?
No, same story.
Same story.
Yeah.
Again, all the way down the Columbia.
Yep. So you got McNary there, and then on down the line before you make it over Bonneville, and then you got a free shot to the ocean.
Okay. So we've gone through 8 dams.
Right.
And now we're out in the ocean. And how much time do we need to spend in the ocean?
1 to 2 years, up to 5.
Okay.
The real big fish that are coming back. Less so in the snake system, but most of those snake fish are 1 to 2 year old. Okay. 1 to 2 salt fish.
So 1 to 2 years in the ocean. Lots of problems out there.
More stuff trying to eat you.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the ocean that's trying to kill you.
Yep.
And, an incredibly dangerous part of this journey is the Lower Columbia. Mm-hmm. Just a tremendous number of predators that are really benefiting from these anadromous fish that are starting up high in the watersheds and coming out.
Right.
Okay, but you're a survivor. You made it. Okay, 2 years in the ocean, and now you decide to come home.
Yeah, you get that same crazy itch to come back to the same place, that same riffle you were spawned in.
You're heading back to the Six Ranch.
Start your old family at the Six Ranch, yep.
Okay, so what's that look like?
Same thing in reverse, right? So you're swimming up through buoy 10 with a bunch of hooks in the water trying to yank you out.
Now you've got a bunch of recreational fishermen that are trying to kill you. What about gill nets? Is that a thing?
It is.
Okay. Who's running gill nets?
Both tribal interests and, white man.
Yep. So there's commercial gill netting as well as tribal gill netting. How much of the fish run that's returning is allocated to tribes?
50%.
50%.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's be generous and say there was 40 of you that made it to the ocean. Is that correct, or am I missing something there? There's 40 of you that made it to the Columbia.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so even fewer, so really there's one, you're the only one coming back out of your 100 brothers and sisters. You're the only one that came back as an adult. Well, that's not entirely true.
No.
So some of you are going to die on the way back.
Yeah. So there's a few of you that are coming back up through the system, but you're getting caught in gill nets. You're getting killed by sea lions.
The majority of the mortality, though, is in that juvenile life stage.
Okay.
So most of them are dying on their way out. And then your survival on the way back is much, much improved, but it's still pretty hairy.
So you've got 8 dam crossings, lots of hazards along the way, 600 miles upriver.
Right.
And then you make it back to that same gravel bar that you were born in on the Six Ranch.
Yep.
And you hopefully find a mate that also made it back.
Right.
And
which is a critical part of the equation. So that's one thing that we skip over in human intervention is that natural selection stage where you're not just mating with any fish that swims up, especially if you're the female. She's kind of the one that gets to decide. And so she's looking for the biggest, strongest buck she can find to reproduce with. And that's part of why wild fish are just really good survivors, is because they're tuned over hundreds, if not thousands of years to survive in their particular watershed.
Sure. And along the way, John, you're out there in the river trying to get them to eat part of a chicken.
Yeah. And there's a few things like the tidal estuary is another place that they get crushed.
What is a tidal estuary?
So where the rivers are emptying into the ocean, and it's kind of half salt, half fresh water. There's a lot of predators there, and a lot of the juvenile fish will go out there and stay there for months at a time before they actually head out into the ocean. So steelhead have a tremendously diverse life history. So that's another place where a huge amount of loss takes place is in the estuaries. But yeah, so we go and fish when the fish are coming back, when the steelhead are coming back, and we go out and we try to catch them, and we throw big hunks of feathers at them, hoping that they're going to eat some kind of shrimp that they tried to eat out in the ocean.
So as the owner of Alpine Archery and Fly, you're selling fly fishing gear, and you're also an angler yourself. Is your interest in making sure that there's steelhead returning primarily in their recreational and economical value to you?
I mean, I would be lying if I said that wasn't a concern.
Right.
But is that the only reason? No, because I fished long before I owned the store. And, we live here because it's a beautiful place. I mean, Union-Wallowa County are some of the prettiest places in all of Oregon. And the fish have a tremendous value historically, not just monetarily, but historically to the region, the tribes here in the area, that was a massive part of their culture. And so there's a historic value to them. There's a perceived, maybe an emotional value as far as we love to see those fish come back. I don't know if you've ever done it, but cutting the barb off a hook and just going out and swinging a fly or fishing something without a hook just to see if there's a fish there. And I think it's preserving not just a lifestyle, but also the area, the geography, the interesting nature of the place that we live, and making sure that is available for future generations, being stewards of the land, making sure that the resources are not depleted or run out. You know, we want renewable things here. We want ongoing things. You know, I've been thinking a lot personally about thinking generationally and getting rid of a consumer mindset and being more of a producer and producing things that are going to last well beyond me. Mm-hmm. And trying to get rid of a consumer mentality in my own life. And this is just another part of that. And that kind of sounds weird coming from a guy who owns a retail store, that we're trying to get rid of a consumer mentality, but that's a lot of the things that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Would you advocate for salmon and steelhead and trout, and whitefish, obviously, if you weren't allowed to fish for them and your customers weren't either?
Absolutely. Because it goes far beyond just the recreational portion of it. Fish play a tremendous part in the ecosystem, and they provide nutrients to the ground when they die.
Let's talk about that. What are marine drive nutrients?
So when Chinook spawn and they die on the riverbank, the decomposition from their bodies essentially is put into the ground, into the water, and it feeds that ecosystem. That's why a lot of times the riparian areas are so lush along riverbanks. And I mean, I guess comparing it to compost, like we all compost things and then use it to fertilize our gardens. Well, fish dying on the riverbank does that naturally.
Right. I think it's something like 140 species are in some way linked to snake river salmon and steelhead.
Yeah.
So everything from, bears to eagles to osprey. There's studies in Alaska where they find marine derived nitrogen, because you can tell it from marine nitrogen from terrestrial nitrogen. They find it in the tops of trees that are
right, and
100 feet tall.
Yeah.
So, it's critical, and something that we've lost as an ecosystem is that influx of marine derived nutrients coming back every year.
And one of the magical things about it is that little tiny fish, went out the 600 miles, got big off of other nutrients in the ocean, and then brought them back.
Right.
So it's a way to get nutrients from the ocean 600 miles inland, and a lot farther for some anadromous fish in some places. But how else am I going to get nutrients from shrimp from,
it's a pretty beautiful
from
system.
The coast of Argentina,
right,
to come back up here to the Six Ranch and then, dissolve into the soil and benefit this multitude of species, and even beyond like the large charismatic species that you're describing, to the microbiome of that river and the riverbank and everything. It's really important.
Yep.
And it wasn't just historically a onesie twosie type situation. We're talking about 10 million fish.
Right. Yeah, 10 to 16 million in Snake Basin.
Yeah.
Is a historic projection. And you said something that I want to expand on, because I'm a hunter and angler. Mm-hmm. That sense of magic is something that I don't think I can explain to somebody that doesn't hunt or fish. Mm. Like being in a sterile environment where there aren't deer or elk or billy goats or, bighorn sheep feels different to me in my soul. And the same thing is true for salmon and steelhead. I referenced loving the Grand Ronde. I don't spend a ton of time out here, but that place had such a huge impact on my person because it's so layered with fish and wildlife. I mean, we had billy goats coming into camp at night, and we caught a 22-inch rainbow. Like, I took my 4-year-old kid on his first river trip on that, Minam to Troy. I mean, it's just an incredible place. And with every one of those species that's lost because of, human malfeasance or whatever it is, like that place loses a little bit of magic. And that might sound woo-woo and shishi, but that's how I feel. And, I think a lot of people that hunt and fish maybe feel that way too. And people that don't, and so you don't even have to interact with those species to get that sense of wonder and that sense of magic out of a place when there's fish and wildlife there.
So that's the good news.
Right.
Who came out with this estimate that the extinction horizon for these species is 5 to 10 years out?
I mean, so 5 to 10 years is an aggressive timeline, but it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Okay.
NOAA fisheries.
NOAA fisheries.
Mm-hmm.
The people that, predict El Nino, La Nina, the Center for Weather Prediction for the entire country.
The world's best scientists.
Yeah,
Let's just
the
leave
world's
it at that.
best scientists
Yeah.
are saying that this isn't the next generation's problem. This is right now.
Right. So it goes back to that smolt to adult ratio. That's really the golden part of the equation. SARs.
Smolt being baby fish.
Yep. And so basically, you need a 2% smolt to adult ratio. You can think of it like 2 fish spawning. You need 2% return to keep that population stable.
Okay. That would be assuming that they have 100 eggs. But they don't.
Well, it's more complicated.
Yeah,
if a steelhead puts out I'm not sure what steelhead is, 3,000 or 4,000, and a chinook's like 5,000 or 6,000 eggs.
Right.
But the way the math shakes out, it just conveniently works out that you need 2% small to adult returns to maintain viability.
Yep.
And so we're at less than 1% in most of the Snake Basin, whereas downstream systems like the Yakima and the John Day are usually, twice that or 3 times that, 3 or 4%. So while those populations are doing good, snake population is decreasing by a factor of 50% genetically every year.
And around 2014, when we had record high runs here, we were knocking on that 4% number.
Right. But all those downstream systems were doing, what did Jeff say, like 8 to 10%?
Yeah.
6 to 10.
Yeah, significantly better. Okay, so what is the biggest thing that could be done to improve the number of smolt that return?
Right. So we work a lot with the Nez Perce tribe at American Rivers, and so Shannon Wheeler, the vice chair of the tribe, says we've played with all the dials. He's famous for saying we've turned a lot of dials. We've invested $24 billion in habitat and in hatcheries. None of that stuff's worked. The biggest dial we've got to turn is removing the lower 4 Snake River dams.
Okay, so there's lower snake dams, there's middle snake dams. The middle snake dams do not have fish passage, right?
Correct. Yep. And not a lot of habitat value up above. So that's why really the conversation is focused on those 4, is because when you turn off the Columbia at Tri-Cities and head up the Snake, you pass the salmon, you pass the Grand Ron, you pass what is projected to be by 2080, with climate change in effect, 65% of the salmon and steelhead habitat in the lower 48 states. Like the beating heart of salmon and steelhead country is between, Hell's Canyon Dam and Lower Granite Dam.
Got it. Which is us.
Which is you.
Yep.
Which is that lucky fish that got to start its life on Six Ranch.
Gosh, it's mind-blowing to me still, even though I've dedicated so much time and effort and resources, just flat out, we gave up the best pasture on the ranch for a decade to be able to improve fish habitat here, and doing one of these river restoration projects where we created a new river channel. Given, my dedication to this, it still blows my mind that any of them make it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems impossible. It seems impossible for a fish to undergo 1,200 river miles, 2 years in the ocean, 16 dam crossings, and all of the obstacles in between to make it back to the gravel bed that they were born in and spawn and start it over.
Yep.
But the fact that they're still able to do it at all is
miraculous.
It's miraculous.
Yeah.
It's magic.
Yeah. My buddy, for folks that aren't familiar with a guy named Shane Anderson, he's got a new film out called The Lost Salmon, and it's about spring Chinook and the plight that they're in, and it focuses a lot on Snake River dams. But I'd highly encourage folks to check that out. You can see it for free online. It's on PBS. But he calls those fish, the reason I bring this up is because there's a biologist in that film that calls salmon mountaineers and mariners. And I think that's so kind of romantic, kind of cheesy, but so true that they are absolute gangsters when it comes to surviving everything the world has to throw at them.
Right. There will be a link to that in the podcast description. If you guys want something easy, just look at the podcast description, and one of the links that is there will be to that video. Okay, so the dams that you're talking about removing are Ice Harbor, Monumental,
Little Goose and Lower Granite.
Little Goose and Lower Granite.
It's between Tri-Cities and Lewiston, basically.
What would happen? There's a lot of people that depend upon those dams and what they provide. It's a lot of energy. It's transport for, what did we say, a couple million bushels of wheat.
It's about 2 million. Yep.
There's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just pull them out, can we ever replace that infrastructure again?
Yeah, I mean, if you pulled them out now, you'd screw over a lot of people. Is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And that's totally true. And that for 20 years we've been talking about these dams coming out.
When were they put in?
Between 60. The last one went in 75.
Okay.
Lower Monumental was finished in 1975.
Gotcha.
So they've been there almost 50 years, which is conveniently their useful lifespan.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So we've got turbines that are aging out. We've got infrastructure that needs replaced. And if they disappeared right now, that would be, it'd be a disaster.
What are locks?
Locks are the navigation structure. So, if you envision a dam in your mind, on the upstream side, you have a higher water level than the downstream side.
Sure.
If you're a barge coming up the Snake River, you park in a lock, it closes behind you, and then slowly the water level fills up until you're at the upstream gradient, and then that opens and you can continue on your way upstream.
That seems like a tremendous structure, like an elevator that can lift hundreds of thousands of tons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and all that stuff actually would stay. If we had an act of Congress that deauthorized these 4 dams, the concrete portions would stay in place, and the earthen portions, which are off to the side, which are just basically a big berm, is what would be removed. So you still have all the infrastructure. If something went diabolically wrong in the future, you could and theoretically put the dam back in place.
Okay. Well, that's nice that it's not like a, all or nothing thing, that
Right.
You could do this on a somewhat experimental basis. And if you realized that this was Pandora's box or was an unforeseen consequence, that you could go back and get after it again. Because frankly, I don't remember dams being built in rivers in my lifetime at all.
Right.
That was really a 50s through 70s thing, that all these major dams, incredible feats of engineering and labor occurred throughout the country, and a lot of good has come from it.
Right.
I think that's worth pointing out, that a tremendous amount of good has come from these dams, but there's been some problems too. The same thing happened with the Wallowa River here on the Six Ranch. The river was straightened with heavy equipment that came home from World War II, and that allowed for transport in and out of the city centers here, right through the middle of the ranch. So we could have a highway, we could have railroad tracks, we could develop this critical infrastructure for people to navigate through here, but it also destroyed a bunch of fish habitat. But with, the engineering that we have today, we're able to create that habitat again and still keep the highway and railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And it worked great. And that's a little bit about what we're talking about with these dam removals. Like, we can keep some of the infrastructure in place in case it's needed, but we can also modify it by removing the earthen portion to allow for better fish passage, so we're not losing 3% of that population every time they cross the dam.
Right. Yep. And the other critical part, James, which I have a feeling you're probably going to get to next, is replacing the services that the dams provide.
Yeah, how do you do that?
So, all credit to Mike Simpson, congressman out of Idaho, for getting the conversation started. He introduced a concept paper a couple years ago that laid out kind of, the kitchen sink on the table, everything from recreational boat owners being compensated for the loss of their recreational opportunity to the cost of moving from barge to rail and truck for the downstream wheat commodities that are shipped to port.
Okay.
So it's not an easy thing, but it is feasible to replace the transportation for downstream crops. About 1,000 average megawatts of power, which is about 4% of the BPA portfolio on the whole. So, it's significant but not irreplaceable amount of power. And then irrigation for a number of irrigators and well users downstream right out of Tri-Cities in the Sacagawea Pool, which is behind Ice Harbor Dam.
That seems like a super easy fix. We're talking about changing the water level by about 100 feet.
Right.
So you just need a bigger pump, bigger generator, and an extra 100 feet of pipe, and you can still draw water out of that river system to be able to irrigate. That doesn't seem that hard to me.
Well, I think part of the work I really enjoyed, speaking about what I'm doing in American Rivers as the Snake River director, is that I'm not in a position to solve that problem. And I am fully aware that there are a lot smarter people than me that use those pipes and those pumps every single day. And we need those folks at the table to craft solutions that work for their communities. This cannot be a campaign of, West Side, Portland, Seattle folks telling Kennewick, Tri-Cities, Wallowa Enterprise what to do. And so what we're working on and why we're here today is to have conversations with folks that are impacted by dam removal and find out what their problems are so that we can solve them.
Yeah, so sitting around the table this morning, we had cattle ranchers, we had outfitters, fly shop owners, we had state biologists, former Fish and Wildlife Commissioner, an old guy who really likes mules.
Legendary old guy likes mules.
Yeah, I don't know. Lowercase L. No, it was a good group of thinkers to tease at this problem and to come up with reasons that it wouldn't work, reasons that it shouldn't go, reasons that it should work, that it should go. I love that. I think that a really critical phase in developing any kind of plan, and John, you may or may not agree with this with your military background, is the first thing you do with any kind of a plan is to hate it, and just hate it to pieces. And then what's left is so resilient that you can build off of it.
Yeah, so the first thing that we did when a plan was put together is destroy it, tear it apart, find every weak spot in it. And then what's left, then you build off of that, right?
Right.
So essentially what you said. And I think that works everywhere is you gotta tear things apart and strip away the bad. In all of this, there's an end goal in mind, and at this point it's developing a roadmap that is usable to get the goal accomplished, but Kyle talked about screwing people over. If we pull the dams out right now, it's going to screw a bunch of people over. And that's true. But nobody wants to do that, right? So which is unusual for this type of project.
Right. Typically when there's some type of environmental project, it's like, hey, sorry, but we care more about this wildlife species than we do about you or your business or the things that are important to you. Like, this wildlife comes first.
Right.
And the way people have approached this is really not that. It's like, hey, how can we make everybody whole and still make this work so that we don't lose these species forever in like 5 to 10 years?
Right. One of the things that I appreciated about the meeting this morning was that there are differences of opinions there, right? Everybody kind of was coming from their own different perspective. And there was no hurt feelings. Like, we could disagree on things, we could argue about things, and it wasn't, well, I didn't get my way, so I'm leaving the table.
Right.
And that's a lot of what's wrong with, in my opinion, what's wrong with the world right now is if somebody doesn't get their way, they're going to take their ball and go home. And we see that in politics, and we see that in everyday life. And people have lost the ability to argue. They've lost the ability to disagree. They've lost the ability to just sit down and talk with somebody. It's the social media world.
Oh, you're ranting now.
Yeah, sure am. And I mean, I talked with your mom about this the other day when she came into the store, and I love it because people can disagree and still talk and still resolve things. And that was the best part about the meeting this morning. And I think that is the map forward.
Yeah.
I think the danger, though, is that if you don't do what we did this morning, it ends up being a judge in Portland that makes the decision for your community.
Or a judge anywhere.
Right.
Well,
I say that because that's the district that's Judge Redden and a couple other judges are the ones that have heard the case and ruled in favor of the plaintiffs.
Yeah.
It's not legally, this is not a good position to be in for pro-dam folks. Like, we need to do stuff to recover Snake River species,
right,
salmon and steelhead species. And it's a question of when it's going to come to somebody making a decision that the dams have to go. Or we can come together as a group of directly impacted stakeholders and find solutions that maybe not everybody wins, but at least you have your say and at least you get to advocate for your community and what what you need.
Well, and to your point, a judge in Portland deciding the livelihood of, you said, let's say 300 employees that work on the Snake River dams. And if I worked on the Snake River dams and some judge in Portland made a decision that cost me my livelihood because he wanted to save some fish,
Yeah.
oh, I'd be mad.
Right.
Right? So, yeah.
And justifiably so.
Yeah.
It's an upsetting situation. And even to go to that guy and be like, look, I know that this job means everything to you and your family. I want to find something else for you to do that gives you the same amount of money, gives you security for your family, but it can't be this. That is still hard. That is still very hard. If somebody came to me and tried to exchange what I'm doing, and I don't know what it's like to work on a dam. Maybe those guys hate their lives, but I'm just assuming that there's people that go to work and love it, and they think that it's awesome, that they're able to take one of the great rivers of the world and bring it to heal, to provide power and transportation and energy and commerce to this large swath of people. And like 3 out of 100 fish died. Like, so what? I'm doing a lot of good here. I think that there's probably that person at the dam. And then to say, hey, I've got another job for you. It's not the same, but it's the same money. Like, that's still a bitter pill to swallow for some of those people.
So I have a friend, customer, came in to the store on Friday to pick up his new bow. And, so we're just talking about things, how things are going in his life and whatever. He's former Marine, so he'll appreciate that.
Yep.
And he works on the dams, works on Ice Harbor. And his job is repairing fish passage.
Okay.
Fish ladders. That's what he works on.
Okay.
I'm doing my part to, what do I answer that guy? Because he's doing his part to make sure that fish are getting through and fish are surviving. And he's like, you're for taking my job away. Now we're still friends. We talk and discuss, and and I think that's important, is that we can talk and discuss. That's a hard situation for me. He's my friend, he's my customer, he's trusting me with his money.
You both care about the same things, just in different ways.
There's going to be winners and losers. Like, I don't mean to be Pollyanna, Mr. Nonprofit guy over here saying, everybody's going to win and rainbows and unicorns and everything's going to be great. Change is hard. Change is always hard.
Yep.
People are going to lose. Some people are going to win. But if you're not at the table, at least having input and saying, hey, like, I'm going to lose my job. My family is going to be without income. What are you going to do for me? Then maybe your concerns won't be heard at all. Like, we heard some concerns around the table this morning that I had never heard before. And those concerns will now be relayed to Congressman Simpson and to Senator Merkley and to Senator Wyden, because that's my job, is to hear that feedback and help make sure that those interests are represented at the table when we do come to a table to figure this all out.
Why should somebody who doesn't live in the Pacific Northwest, will never be here? This is a global audience, right? These shows are downloaded in 120 countries. Why should somebody live someplace else care? I think if a few baby fish die when they go over concrete walls.
We were talking about that on the way up here, and I think John and I were the closest analogy, I think, for an environmental campaign, quote unquote environmental conservation campaign, whatever you want to call it, is the pebble mine.
Okay.
You could walk into any fly shop in the United States and find a no pebble sticker on the cash register.
Right, and they couldn't find Bristol Bay on the map.
Right.
Maybe.
But it is the beating heart of Alaskan salmon.
Yep.
And we're talking the same thing, the Snake Basin. This is the beating heart of the lower 48 salmon and steelhead. So if you care about, I'll probably never go to Alaska, and I'm going to Alaska this summer, but I'll probably never go to Bristol Bay. Crappy example. I've got no pebble stickers all over my coolers.
Yeah.
And I'll probably never fish there.
Yeah.
But it's just like that magic of knowing that a place like that exists. And maybe someday I will get to go there, or maybe my kids will get to go there, or their kids.
They've been having some big runs.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a similar question, James.
Yep.
Where is the farthest place the Six Ranch has shipped beef?
It's hard to say, since we got into since we started doing cured beef. we can send that to Australia.
Right.
I understand the point that you're teasing at, and it's a good one. But all over the country.
All over the country.
All over the country.
So why should those people care about Snake River? Because this is part of it.
It's true.
So I want to expand, just make sure people understand. So, like, we're here in the geography. We're in the Snake Basin. This basin was responsible for, what did Jeff and Kyle say this morning? 30% of all Columbia River salmonids.
No,
I think it's double that.
So the
50%.
The Grand
Ronde is 30%.
Yeah. The Grand Ronde is 30% of the Snake River Basin.
Of the Snake, and the Snake is not quite half of the Columbia Basin salmon and steelhead production. Those fish are caught at buoy 10. They're caught, out in the open ocean on a non-selective fishery. Like, you could be eating Grand Ronde steelhead or salmon. Well, probably not steelhead because you can't really buy it, but Grand Ronde Chinook for dinner and not even know it.
Sure.
So if you like eating salmon and you live in Norway,
right,
you might be eating Pacific Northwest salmon, and so this has an impact on you.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about this morning, because a lot of the early environmental pressure on this was about orcas.
Right.
We've got some particular orcas off the Oregon coast. As you might imagine, they're foodies, as it turns out. What is the deal with that?
Yeah, so the resident orcas, I'm not an orca expert by any means, and there are some people that are very passionate about orcas that have made a very big deal about Snake River Dam removal, because your foodie orcas, the southern resident killer whales, only eat Chinook. Unless things are really dire, maybe they'll eat something else.
And some of them are literally starving to death.
Yep. There was the
mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, we can teach them to jump through flaming hoops, but they're only going to eat this type of fish. But, I can't solve that for them other than to provide more fish. And it's the first time I've ever thought about how supporting a cattle ranch that is doing right by a river is also supporting orca whales.
That's wild.
How interesting is that?
Wild.
And of course there's a billion species in between here and there, but those are some really charismatic ones.
I think you got a brand there. Orca Safe Beef, I think, could take the industry by storm, Jamie.
Oh, but I used to talk about our beef in front of groups all the time, and I would describe it as salmon friendly and combat free. And combat free beef's not a thing. But you could see some people like nod along in agreement, like, oh, at last, combat-free beef. I love all the labels.
$5 extra a pound, please.
Yeah, I love all the labels that people put on stuff. Yeah. A lot of it's just marketing razzle-dazzle. But, no, I kind of felt good about that this morning. And I was like, I've never seen a killer whale in the wild. I doubt I ever will. But it's interesting to think about habitat here that's been improved because of cattle and cattle ranchers that is providing meals for orca whales. That is an amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The world is so connected. I like it.
Yep.
So we got to come up with what? $30 billion?
Between 10 and 30 billion is
Between 10 and 30 billion?
Well, so Congressman Simpson and then also Washington Senator Patty Murray and Governor Jay Inslee followed up the Simpson concept paper with a report that kind of dove deeper, and that was their figure, was $10 billion to $33 billion to replace the services and take the dams out.
Okay.
Pocket change.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Can you put a value on living in a place that has salmon and steelhead?
Well, I live in a place that only should have them.
Right.
So
how does that feel?
I don't know, man. It feels good. It feels good, but it's hard for me to say, yeah, this is worth 10 to 30 billion dollars because of the theory that if we do this, then a few more percentage points of smolt will return as adults. Yep. Like, is that cost really worth it? And are we too late? Like, by the time we get Congress to act on this,
mm-hmm.
right? With a presidential election coming up,
right?
And then we get the funding, and then we implement it. Is it going to be too late? And then did we cause other problems throughout the process?
Mm-hmm.
They're real questions.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about within considering that is, let's just say, worst case scenario, it is too late for salmon and steelhead in this basin. For the fish that have to cross those 4 lower snake dams, let's just say it's too late for them. That despite our best efforts and the most rapid course of action that we could take, that they're going to go away. Maybe it's not too late for another species, right?
Well, and I think, the human component of that, James, is like we're looking for investments in infrastructure that leave us better regardless of salmon.
Yeah.
We've got climate change screwing things up with lower flows in the summer and higher flows in the winter. The dams are becoming less and less of a valuable energy source because the time of their max production is off from when demand is highest, when people are running their air conditioners or their heaters.
Right.
So, barging is falling in the snake reach. Like it's declined over the years. It's just becoming a less viable transportation option. And why don't we invest in really high quality, future forward thinking rail infrastructure and road infrastructure that leaves us better as a region? Let's develop energy systems that also do the same, that ensure like a more predictable utility rate that keeps things low for future generations.
Yeah.
BPA, they're coming into negotiations with all of their ratepayers.
What is BPA?
The Bonneville Power Administration. So that's the quasi-federal entity that markets the power generated by the Columbia System dams.
What is quasi-federal?
So they're not a federal agency, but they're the power marketer for the federal agency.
Okay. And they're federally funded.
Right.
So like Army Corps of Engineers owns the dams. BPA essentially owns the energy. Pretty
much, yeah, and all the transmission for the energy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where we are right here, is about 400 yards from the closest power lines. It cost me $30,000 to get power 400 yards to here. We have cheap energy here, and I'm grateful for that. Even though, while our energy, like what's turning these lights on inside the studio right now, should be hydro, there's a good chance it's coal because we're exporting our hydro energy all the way to California. But for the convenience of light and electricity and power, it is tremendously expensive to move it around. Tremendously expensive. This has made me appreciate electricity like few other times in my life, because now I understand a little snippet about the expense and labor it takes to move it.
Yep.
You're talking about those locks costing how much to maintain every year?
It's hard to pin down a number, but it's somewhere, the operations and maintenance of the dams is somewhere between $100 and $300 million a year.
Wow.
And that just depends on your accounting, and the federal government's not.
And is that spread through 4 dams?
Yes, that's the cost of the snake system. Yeah.
Besides sending wheat out, what other transport is going on the river?
It's primarily wheat out, and then fuel and fertilizer coming up.
Gotcha.
But a lot of empty barges. If you drive along the Columbia, you can tell by looking at a barge whether it's loaded down by how much freeboard there is. And there's, you see a lot of empty barges coming upriver. So, yeah, so those are the primary products coming upriver. Mostly white winter wheat going out, and it's actually, the use of that winter wheat, it's going overseas to make ramen noodles in Japan and in China.
Ramen noodles?
Ramen noodles.
I'm
white
a fan.
winter wheat. Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
I wish they could grow it somewhere else, but no. It's a valuable industry, and it provides, a robust economy for the Palouse. So.
And the Palouse is a special place. Talk to me a little bit about what the Palouse is.
Yeah, it's a very, I went to college at Washington State. I grew up in Spokane, care a lot about Eastern Washington. I should know more about the geomorphology of the Palouse, but it's basically, it's the hills between Spokane and Pullman and a little bit further south that are just rolling, highly productive topsoil that is, the epicenter of wheat production in the United States.
And very little of it is irrigated.
Right, it's all dryland wheat. Yep. So all the irrigation's coming out of Sacagawea Pool at Ice Harbor, and that's primarily for wineries and for fruit crops and for other, center pivot agriculture.
So how does the wine industry feel about this?
I think, I think the entire campaign I think of as a bell curve, where there's people in the tails of the curve that are passionate on one side or the other, and then there's a whole lot of people in the middle that either don't have enough information or don't care or, just haven't made up their minds yet. And I think the wine industry is probably in a similar place.
And who owns that?
Who owns the wineries?
No, the areas that are being irrigated.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that this morning. It's, while it's romantic to think of it as family farms, it's the primary irrigators in the lower Snake are about 9 or 10 landowners, and I think 27 well users that would have to have their wells deepened or their pumps extended. So it's not a whole lot of irrigators in the lower river.
And then who owns that?
A variety of corporate commercial farms. Actually, the Church of Latter-day Saints is a majority landowner down there.
So the Mormons are making wine?
No, they're growing other crops.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I don't think they're making wine.
They could be growing the grapes.
Could be growing the grapes.
But
what happens with the grapes
stays with the grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
but
fun.
Just get hardworking people that need to be part of the solution, and I think that's what we're trying to do with American Rivers and with Eric Crawford from Trout Unlimited, who couldn't be here today, but having those conversations, sometimes really hard conversations, to figure out what people's concerns are and find solutions to them, instead of just saying, orcas are dying and salmon are dying and we need to save them. Like, let's come together as a community and figure this out together is the approach that we're taking.
It's just urgent. It feels urgent to me.
Yeah. Yeah. 65% of all the salmon and steelhead habitat in the lower 48 states by 2080. By the time we've got, grandkids running around.
By 2080, what? What happens in 2080?
It'll be, so right now it's like, I don't know the stat right now. It's 40%, I want to say, of salmon and steelhead habitat in the lower 48. But as climate gets warmer, water gets warmer, all the habitat will be in these high protected areas, the Frank Church and, other areas in the Snake Basin, high elevation, cold, clean water. It's the only place that salmon and steelhead will be able to persist.
Gotcha.
That's interesting being so far inland, because, we're pretty much, the Snake River drainage is the most inland
right.
Salmon and steelhead habitat in North America right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, snakes and salmon.
And
900 miles and 6,000 feet these fish traverse to get home to Stanley.
Yeah.
They're literally Olympic athletes, and we're making them breathe through a straw.
Yeah, the water temp thing was a big one. And as we talk about, like, not dam removal, but, dam replacement on Wallowa Lake, which Wallowa Lake's 300 feet deep. That dam's holding back 17 feet of water or something. It's not much. But it's got a crack in it. It could hold back some more and provide some more acre feet of storage for irrigation. It's very cold water. It's almost sterile. It's so cold. It's drinkable water. As that dam gets fixed, we're going to have to allow for fish passage, and the fish that would be using that are sockeye or red salmon. The problem with this that I see is that sockeye need to be coming up the Columbia River in August. And those water temperatures right now are lethal.
Right.
They're lethal. So it's not field of dreams. It's not like, oh, we put in a fish ladder and now we can have a sockeye run. It's like, no, they'll die. They'll die hundreds of miles before they even get here.
And that does happen. That has happened. There's historic precedent for really hot years. But what they're doing, so EPA has done some fascinating work. The lab or the EPA office out of Corvallis, actually, some of the folks down there that I live with, you can think of an adult salmon coming back as a battery. Like, it has a certain, they don't eat when they get back into freshwater. So they've got fat stores to get them home. And so the warmer the water, the more energy they expend coming upstream. And if it's too hot, they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
But what they're doing, what EPA has done through telemetry studies and pit tagging, has found that they're zigzagging up the river using cold water refugia of tributaries like the Deschutes and the John Day, like where all those tributaries are coming in. Where
you see 700 boats in a 1 acre area just clubbing them to death.
Just racking on them. And so that's how they're making their journey home. They're pinballing back and forth up the Columbia, up the mouths of tributaries.
Yeah.
So that's where the yeoman's work is done, is, why watershed restoration, what you guys are doing on your ranch is so important, is because getting that water out of the Wallowa into the Grand Ronde, into the Snake, into the Columbia, every little drop counts, and the colder we can keep it by improved riparian areas and, other cooling restoration work.
Typically, water warms as it goes downstream, just as a rule. This project we did here, and I'm bragging right now, was so effective that the water is warmer above us than it is below us.
Yeah.
We cool it off in 2.5 miles.
Exactly.
Measurably.
Hyperreic flow going through gravel and through log structures and being in the shade.
Making it deeper, slower, shadier, creating pool, riffle, run, and glide in succession and in different ways. It's an amazing thing. And in the years past that were really, really warm, that, we had to, use hoot owl and shut down fishing in the afternoon. They actually shut it down at the border of the ranch because we were cold enough up here that we could fish all day long without hurting the fish. But below it warmed up again and you couldn't.
Right.
So projects like this, they make a real world measurable difference.
Mm-hmm. So does a dam, because the dam, the reservoir behind a dam is like a big bathtub sitting in the sun.
That's not a spreadsheet. It's not a TED Talk. It's a physical thing that you've done to improve the quality of habitat and the odds that a fish survives.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So what are the temps behind, let's say, Ice Harbor?
Well, it fluctuates throughout the year. And I'm out over my skis a little bit. Eric, if you have Eric Crawford come in, he's really good at temperature. The water coming into out of Hell's Canyon can be pretty warm.
Right. So I'm talking the fish are coming back in. It's August, September. That's about the time that the fish are coming up.
70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the 70s.
Right.
Yep.
And steelhead prefer low 50s and lower, right?
Anything up to 70, 70 and above is lethal.
Yeah.
65 to 70 is sublethal. Yeah.
Right. So there's how many fish are dying just from the hot water.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. A few,
at least.
But it'd be colder without 4 dams slowing that water down.
Exactly. And
yeah.
That was kind of the point that I was getting to, is like, if we can have a free-flowing river, the water will definitely cool down.
There's got to be just a huge amount of sediment and sludge that's built up, probably a lot of it toxic, heavy metals. Like, once we kick these things loose, how long is it going to take them to clear up? Are they going to flow mud for 100 years?
Well, I think, we've got some interesting proxies to look at, like Elwha dams in Washington.
Tell me about that one.
I'm, again, out over my skis a little bit, but Glens Canyon, and I don't recall the name of the other dam that came out about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
It was 2015, sticks in my mind. But so those dams came out, and they recovered way faster. All that sediment behind those dams got flushed out within a year or two.
Yeah, and really within hours, it was flowing clear.
Right.
And some of the engineers thought that it would be muddy for a long, long time.
Yeah. And so, similar proxy happening now is the Klamath Dam's coming out.
And I don't know much about that.
Neither do I. Be interesting to have somebody on that does. But, we'll be certainly looking closely at the success of that project because, you take dams out, and the thought is if you build it, they will come, and we'll see if that bears fruit. But all signs point to yes.
All signs point to yes, and however, playing devil's advocate, a lot of that is done on one dam rivers that are pretty close to the ocean, not 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th dam that the fish have to cross coming back up.
Yeah.
So it is different. We're way more inland than what the Elwha is for sure, the Carmel River Dam in California, or even the Klamath. But you said earlier, the gentleman from the Nez Perce tribe, we turned all the dials. We've done this.
Shannon Wheeler. Yeah, Vice Chair Wheeler.
We've looked at habitat restoration. We can't do anything about ocean conditions. Putting tons of fish into the system through hatcheries has helped to some degree keep fish in the river, keep recreation going, but it hasn't fixed the problem.
Right.
This might be the last thing.
It is.
Right.
Without a doubt. This is our last lever to pull.
Okay. So if somebody's listening and they're like, man, I would love for there to be salmon and steelhead in the future. They think that this is a good idea. They want to take a little bit of action.
Mm-hmm.
Are they reaching out to you guys? Are they reaching out to Congressman Bentz?
All the above. Yeah. I mean, I'd welcome folks to take a look at American River's website to learn more. You can sign up for our listserv. We'll be sending, updates throughout the campaign. Trout Unlimited, I think it's tu.org/lower snake. They've got great info. And, it's going to take an act of Congress to make the dams deauthorized. So if you do, if you live in Oregon or Washington or Idaho, It's pretty easy to figure out who your local elected or your federally elected officials are and either call their office or.
Well, and Congressman Bentz sits on a natural resources
subcommittee. Yeah. He's the chair.
Yeah, he's in a good place to actually do something with it. So what we'll also do is, if you look in that podcast description, you're going to see his email, and it's easy enough to just click on that and say, hey, I know I would like to support or not support the removal of the lower snake dams, or I've got questions about it. Just start the conversation. If you feel like, if you feel anything about this, then it's going to take you about 45 seconds to click on that and write a quick email. Congressman Bentz has some really, really wonderful aides that are very responsive, that read these emails. I don't agree with everything that he does, and I don't agree with everything that anybody does.
Yeah.
But I do know that this information gets to him, which I cannot say about a lot of politicians. So that'll be easy enough. If you feel like this, if you feel anything about this, you can take some action there. And then if you have any questions for these two gentlemen, how do they get a hold of you?
You can send me an email, ksmith@americanrivers.org.
Okay.
AlpineArcheryandFly.com is our website.
Yep. And there's a contact form on there.
Yep. And it's our email address is alpinearcheryllc@gmail.com. That's really about it.
So you can get a conservationist perspective. You can get, John, your perspective is very much that of a conservationist, but it's also of somebody who's affected from an economic perspective as well. And, I can always trust you to be honest about that, which I appreciate. I don't know. I hope we're not too late, but I think that every time I felt like, and this goes into hunting in a lot of different scenarios, business, even this podcast, like I've often felt like, oh, I'm too late. I should have gotten started sooner. But every time that I've gone ahead and gotten started and gotten after it, I'm not too late.
Right.
And I think that that's probably the situation we're in right now, where you can feel that clock ticking, but it is certainly not too late.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly resilient animals.
Yeah.
If we just can figure out ways, the more we can get out of their way and let them do their thing,
right,
the better off they're going to be, and ultimately the better off we're going to be too, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
Appreciate your time, James. Thanks for having us on.
Appreciate you guys coming out. Yeah, coming over to Eastern Oregon, saying hello.
Trying to drag my wife over here. We'll see if I'm successful.
Yeah, I don't make it to Eastern Oregon enough.
John lives 40 air miles west of me, but I can see Idaho when I wake up in the morning. So
yeah, it's not Eastern Oregon until you cross over the Minam.
It's just too bad it's unlivable here in the wintertime. Otherwise, it'd be pretty special. So, all right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, both very much. And I hope that people will reach out to you with questions. I hope they'll do research on their own. And if they want to take action, I hope they'll take a minute and send Congressman Bentz a quick little email. Easy enough. Thank you, gents. About a decade ago, I launched my old aluminum drift bow onto a remote whitewater river and floated for a couple sunny spring days to meet some friends who were bear hunting downstream. While I made them dinner that evening, one of my buddies came over and showed me a SIG rangefinder. I'd heard of the company and I'd seen their gear while I was a Marine, but this was the first time I'd seen one of their products built for hunters. The range popped up instantly, and it continued to range everything I put the reticle on as I scanned across the canyon. I'd never seen anything like it on the civilian market, and frankly, not on the military one either. Since that day, SIG has come out with a long list of high-quality and innovative products for hunters, as well as continuing the same for military, law enforcement, and responsible citizens. They have some great training facilities located around the country, too. Check out all that SIG has to offer on their website, sigsauer.com. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by SIG. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast or me at Six Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.